Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone 2 Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Welcome everyone to today's episode of The Bend. I am your host, Debbie Boone. And today I have the amazing Meagan Parks. Now, Meagan is a licensed technician. I met her because she did a very unusual thing, and she sent out a survey and found out why veterinary technicians were leaving the profession and what their pain points were. So we're going to touch a little bit on that. But just to give you a little bit of a background, Meagan is a mother to 6 furry friends, many fish, and 3 human children. She's an artist, she's a partner to a wonderful husband, and she is passionate about veterinary medicine. She was raised in Kansas City and still lives there with her family. So she's right in the middle of Animal Health Corridor. One of her bends in the road was when she was 17, she did place a baby for adoption. And we're going to talk about crusade to help adoption reform. But she also supports and advocates for these licensed veterinary technicians and works to improve their lives. She graduated from Maplewoods Veterinary Technology in 2011 with her associates in applied science and veterinary technology, became registered that same year. She also has her bachelor's in business administration. And currently she works with Pet Folks Talent Resource Team and helping their operations team find on-site support in her free time. It's kids, animals, husband, friends, social and nonprofit networking groups that she supports. She tries to create art, attend live music, garden in her downtime. And her favorite professional authors from the last year's reading are Jim Collins, Tasha Eurich, and Brene Brown. Oh, you hit on 3 of my absolute favorites. So we have to talk books too. And gardening, because, I live in the South and I'm starting to plant stuff already for the season. And I used to be an artist. I used to paint pet portraits for people.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's when I had time, right?
I know. Yeah. It's a struggle. It's a struggle.
I still live in Hope. My palette's still close by. So my oil paints, thank God they live 100 years, right? So they haven't gotten hard yet. And one day I'm going to pull those brushes back out and finish this 3 by 5 foot painting that I started of the underneath the water. But now it lives under the bed. One day.
Yes, one day. That's awesome.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I love having a creative outlet.
Yes, I think it really helps manage both sides of your brain, right? Give you something to get lost in other than your head. And that loop of, oh gosh, what do I need to do now? I'm going to stop that. So Meagan, thanks for being with us today. I appreciate your time. Tell us how you got started. What led you to vet med?
Well, I love this story because I think it's important, especially in the atmosphere that we're in right now with the lack of personnel and looking for talent outside of vet med possibly, and bringing people in that don't typically have veterinary experience, because it's what we have to do because there's not enough veterinary, professionals out there to fulfill the need. I was a late bloomer, so I, placed my daughter for adoption when I was 7. I had just turned 17 that month and was going into my junior year of high school. And so it really kind of rocked my world. I was in a lot of grief and pain, and high school is hard enough. So I ended up graduating early. I had been working at a grocery store chain called Hy-Vee. Some people may be familiar with it. They're not everywhere. They're mostly in the Midwest. And I started working there as soon as I could work. Pretty much my whole family. My older sister worked there. I worked there. My little sister, it was kind of a family affair. And so I worked there for almost 5 years, through high school, through my pregnancy. They were almost my second family. And when I graduated, I didn't have any plans. I didn't know, I didn't want to go to college. I originally wanted to be an artist, wasn't really sure. So I kind of lost myself, so to speak, when I kind of moved out of home and kind of bounced around and walked maybe a dark path here and there. And then when I was 19, got a job at a restaurant and started bartending. So that was totally different, from retail/grocery. That was a whole different world. Learned the hospitality industry. It took me about 3 months to really figure out how to serve tables. I almost got fired. It was a really bad deal.
So it's like the training was like vet med training, like follow her, right?
Yeah, it really was. It was like, all right, well, you're going to either make it or you won't. And I actually ended up working there through college. And then I was 20. So 2005, 2006, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I started going to school. I was in college, working full-time at Outback Steakhouse. And then I also worked on the plaza as a bartender part-time. So I've always had multiple jobs. And I'm, floating through life, not really sure, taking classes, thinking I'm going to be an artist, getting my gen eds out of the way because I had been, late to get into college. And a friend of mine was sitting at the bar with me one night, and that's what we would do after our shift, from the bar. We were young, and we were sitting there eating our dinner, and we were talking about, what we were going to do with the rest of our lives. And she looks at me and she goes, "Don't you like animals a lot?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've always loved animals. I grew up on farms. My grandparents both owned cattle farms and raised corn and wheat." And she's like, "My vet is actually hiring for people. They've been telling us that they're looking for someone like a vet assistant or something." And I was like, "Oh, really?" So I literally filled out a paper application and went in there and handed them my application and said, "Hey, a friend of mine's a client here, and she said that you all were looking for help, and I like animals, and I'm in college. I don't know what I'm going to do." And they're like, "Okay." So they gave me an interview that day, and they hired me, I think, the next day, part-time. And they let me start as a vet assistant, which was uncommon at the time because usually they would start people in the kennel.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if they were just like, "Oh, this girl has people skills, so she can talk to people. Let's put her in the front." And I was fortunate enough to have this amazing technician who was currently in school, in vet tech school. She taught me everything. She loved to teach. She's still a very good friend of mine. Her name's Shannon. And I talk about her all the time, and she's like, "Meagan, you're gonna make me cry." But she's just this phenomenal mentor. She was a mentor to me, and I soaked everything up that she said. And I had no idea that this was a profession. And my parents never let us have pets growing up, so all of my experience with animals was on my grandparents' farm. And so it was just like a brand new world to me. And I just was a sponge, and I was soaking it all up. And I'm like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I feel like the first week that I was there, I'm like, this is it. And I think it was really that hospital that I worked for was Eagle Animal Hospital in Riverside, Missouri. And they're now one of the largest hospitals where I live. And they've opened 2 other locations. I'm still very good friends with the veterinarians that run it, and the technicians. And, they have done something right. And they have actually grown the majority of their technicians themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they've really figured out that, bringing people on that have that, if you can have empathy and compassion and talk to people, and you have these skills to really want to help, and you have this self-starterism is what I like to call it. I think that you can make a great technician, or doctor, or CSR, or practice manager. If they have those soft skills, you can teach them all that tech stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You can teach them all that stuff. And I like to remind good friends of mine when they kind of start, I call it elitism, in vet med, well, they can't do that because they don't know how, or, they don't have any experience, or we're really looking for someone with experience. And I understand that. I understand that training's hard and it's difficult. And if you don't get it right, it can go very wrong. But I think it's important to also remember that there are some phenomenal people out there that want to get into this industry, and all they need is a chance to get started. And you never know where they're going to end up. I never in a million years thought that I would be sitting here talking to you
Yeah,
about my
yeah.
career.
Same here. Same here. I grew up in the restaurant business, and in hiring people, I did like you. I looked for people skills because we lived in an area. There were so few licensed technicians available because it was really close to Research Triangle Park in Raleigh, and all of the people who got licensed would go there because at that time, back in the 90s, they were paying $20 an hour and all these benefits because you were working for like Burroughs Wellcome and Pfizer and Wife Pharmaceuticals and stuff. And so we really couldn't even begin to compete. Although, in the scheme of things, our practice paid well. So I grew a lot of assistants up to the point where they were, and my doctors loved to train. That was the other thing. They were very willing to teach. So they just would teach people all kinds of skills. And they would do stuff too. They weren't too good to get their hands dirty and do stuff. It was kind of I'm the hospital administrator and I'll go back and do laundry. And so because we need to get unburied, and whoever has free hands needs to do that.
Yes.
I said something about that one day in a class, and the veterinarian said, well, you just said, to stay in your lane and leverage your people. I said, that's fine. I said, you do leverage your people, but you don't abandon them in time of crisis. If you're standing there with your hands in your pockets, just because you don't say it's not my job, I'm going to go help, that kind of stuff. But, I love to get people from the restaurant business because one of the things I learned growing up, and, I started as a cashier at 12 years old. Then when I turned about 15, I was the hostess. And then when I turned 16, I was a waitress, which I swore I would never do because I knew I would never get out of doing it again if I ever learned how. But, the first night I waited on tables, and you got to figure this is like way back because I was 16. I made like $30, and that would be in today's equivalent of about 150. And
Yeah.
I was a kid, right? And so $30, man, it was burning a hole in my pocket. And then you would go back the next weekend and you could do it again, right? And so it was like this never-ending source of money. So I
Yeah.
ended up waiting on tables all through college. But one of the things that teaches you, especially, when you're thinking about being a good tech, is think before you move. And I know you probably do this too, because once you've tended bar, you've got a plan where you're going next. And so everybody gets served. And I watch servers, poorly trained, walk themselves to death. They'll, just back and forth and back and forth and back
Sure.
and forth instead of planning their route with all the things they could possibly do and taking those routes. And I see the same thing when people are working in the treatment room who don't have that think before you move mentality, because you can really be so inefficient and walk yourself to death and work twice as hard as you really need to if you don't stop a minute and go, okay, I need to carry the meds for this one. I need to check the fluids on this one, and this one pooped in its crate, so I need to call for some help and all that kind of stuff before you take off across the room. And my doctor's calling too. That's the other thing too. My
Yep.
doctor's like,
Yep.
hey, yeah,
And then there's an emergency walking in the front
yeah.
door.
Of course
And
there is.
yeah, yes, yeah. So exactly that. And I really do think that individuals from the hospitality industry, they already have that mindset of, the guest comes first, and
Mhm.
I'm here to, give them a great experience because it's already ingrained in you. And
Mhm.
and it's very similar to grocery, actually. I mean, the grocery store, it's there for the customers. And so I had that mentality when I came into hospitality, and I bartended even through vet tech school. So I was a bartender, and honestly, that's what paid my rent, because I certainly wasn't making very much at the vet clinic.
Exactly.
um, is yeah, so
Yeah.
a lot of weekend work. I was a weekend warrior, and a lot of nights, but I loved it. I'm a high energy individual anyways, so it was a natural transition. And a couple years into it, when I graduated, I went to emergency, which was a pretty obvious transition for me because I just really love that, that
You're an
rush.
adrenaline junkie. You're an
Yes,
adrenaline
yes,
junkie.
yeah, and I love the rush, and
Yeah.
but it was so fulfilling to be able to be there and be needed by people too. I mean,
Mhm.
it was really cool to help those pet owners, and they were just always, not always, but
Mhm.
for the majority of the part, they were always just so thankful that we were there, and at 3 in the morning when nobody else was. So it
Right.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
it was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought, because I ran emergency for 3.5 years, and I've always laughed and said at 3 in the morning, the clients are either drunk, high, or crazy. And because that's why they're up and out, right, at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then they have $20 and you got to solve the problem. So
Yep.
that's the challenge.
Yeah. I spent a lot of my own money on pets that were relinquished. There
Yeah.
was yeah, little Boston that came in. I remember she had ingested rat poison,
Oh
and
boy.
she was actively bleeding, and they didn't have any money. So we convinced them to relinquish her, and I took responsibility. But she just passed away last year. So she was like 14 or 15. She lived a great I didn't keep her. She
Yeah.
was aggressive towards other dogs. Of course, the Boston that I saved is aggressive towards other dogs. But I found her a great home with another tech, and she lived a wonderful single dog life. But I mean, but that's the joy of emergency. We have these like phenomenal, I don't know a single technician that has worked in emergency that doesn't have a plethora of just amazing stories of,
Oh, yeah.
saving animals, or,
Those wins are just
oh,
amazing, right? They're just, I mean, and you see these animals come in and you go, oh Lord, this is going to die before we get it to the treatment room.
and
And
then
I will tell
it's
you the craziest story. We watched this dog come in, and we had a boarded ophthalmologist on our staff. He was double boarded in internal medicine and ophthalmology,
that's
and it was
handy.
his day off. So this dog comes in like a border collie mix, wagging its tail. And Meagan, this dog has a stick in its eye, and it's going through right beside the eyeball, and it goes up into the upper sinus, and it's that far into this dog's brain. I mean, into its upper sinuses, and just like missed the brain. The guy was throwing the stick. The dog runs to get it, reaches down, impales itself, and comes walking into our hospital wagging its tail with this 1 foot 1 inch stick sticking out of its eye. So we call our ophthalmologist. You got to get here right now. So he drives over, and we put the dog under, and he removes that stick. And I want you to know, the dog went home on antibiotics. It was fine. The stick had just pushed the orbit over enough, and yeah, it went up into the upper sinus, but it missed going any further. So basically, the dog was going to have like a major sinus infection. So socked it with antibiotics, sit at home, the dog recovered just fine. It is amazing the stuff that we see. And the cautionary tales that you just want to tell every pet owner, like, don't do that, right? Don't do all this stuff, because it's gonna get you in trouble, and you
Yeah.
won't anticipate the fact that these things are going to happen. I mean, just like riding dogs in the back of the truck, just oh my gosh, that just drives me crazy, and I have to bite my tongue
It
so
gives me
bad.
anxiety whenever I see them, or they're like hanging out the window,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
you're just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, stop,
Yep. I
uh,
know. I know. So
they're
let's
fun.
talk about some curveballs in your life. I mean, obviously, adoption, you want to talk a little bit about that, and I think that might
Yeah.
be something that people could relate to.
So, well, this is kind of a funny picture, but I mean, so this is Regan. This is
Okay.
and this is an old picture, but my other two daughters with her, this is a good friend of mine put herself in the frame, for fun. But so Regan is, she'll be 21 this summer. I am a huge part of her life, but I wasn't always. When I grew up in a very religious family, who I love, and we are still all very, very close. But when I was a teenager, I was heavily involved in youth group. I actually my original plan in life was to be a missionary. So I wanted to travel and, do tons of awesome work all over the world. I had at that point gone on many, many mission trips myself and fundraised and was very active in my church. And my sister, so I have an older sister, a younger sister, and a little brother. And my older sister was having a little soiree at her boss's house right before Thanksgiving, and she was house sitting. And so we convinced my mom that we were just going to go and I was going to stay with my sister and we were just going to watch movies. But really, it was a party, and alcohol was involved. And her boyfriend's best friend was there, and one thing led to another. We went to the basement, and so I had never done anything like that before. I hadn't drank, I had never been to a party. This was like completely out of character for me, but I was a 16-year-old kid, wanting to live the high life and be, my older sister wanted me to come party with her, so of course I'm like, okay, my teenager brain kicked in. And so, first time, and got pregnant and hid my pregnancy for 7 months. I was terrified. I had, my parents are wonderful people, so I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression, but they were very authoritarian growing up. They were raised in, Midwest, country families that were very, very strict, and that's how I was raised. And so it was just absolutely terrifying to me, because not only had I had done something that I was really against my own personal beliefs, I had also, I think, disappointed my family, and my father had a little bit of a temper, and my mom wasn't exactly the most compassionate person, so I hid it. And my sister came home from college the next summer. So that was in November. So school lets out. I had been kind of acting very strange. My mom didn't know what was going on. I didn't tell a single soul, Debbie. I'm talking not a single friend. Nobody knew. And I was a very small person in high school, so it was easy for me to hide. My mom just thought I was getting fat. She had me like doing exercise videos.
Oh my gosh.
And so May comes around, and end of May, early June, my sister came home from college. And I remember the night I had locked myself, I'll get a little vulnerable here. I had locked myself in the bathroom and I was considering suicide, because it was such a terrifying reality to me that there was a baby in here that I was probably never going to be able to keep, because I knew what my fate was. I knew that adoption was the only option. And so my sister came home and I walked down the street. My mom finally got me out of the bathroom. I was a mess and she didn't know what was wrong with me. I wouldn't talk to her. She didn't know. And so I came downstairs, and I remember my sister she was in her bed. She loves reading. And she looks up over her book and she goes, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" And I remember just the relief that came with her saying it out loud. Somebody else saying it out loud just made me collapse on the floor. And we spent all night writing a letter to my parents and making a plan for like how we were going to handle it and tell my parents. And the next day we sat them down and told them, and it was really tough because I was already so far along. I was due just in a couple months. So we immediately got to work making a plan. My mom is she's a planner. She's a very organized person, and so we immediately got help. And I went into labor the day that I was supposed to start my junior year of high school, and she came pretty quick, and she was born at 9 pounds, 2 ounces. So she was a gigantic baby.
Wow.
And I picked the family she went to, and they were always open to an open adoption. And at the time, my parents didn't have a ton of time to really digest this. I didn't have even enough time to digest it. And so it kind of created a perfect storm of emotions and confusion for me and my parents, because, I placed her for adoption so that I was able to finish high school and go to college and like have that young life that I wanted and my parents wanted for me, and also to give Regan a chance to grow up in a family that didn't need to be on welfare. And
Mhm.
We were not in a financial position to be able to have a baby. And I don't think I would, go back in time and I would change some things, but I think I would still let her have that life, because the family that I chose, I didn't know where they were in the US. I didn't know where they were geographically. I knew that she had an older brother already. He was about 5 when she was born, or 3. He was 3. I think he was about to turn 4. They were struggling with infertility, trying to have another baby, and they had a dog and a cat, and that was really important to me because I never grew up with animals. And so when when I placed her with them, they were always open to an open adoption. They always sent me letters and pictures through the mail, and when I could, I would send communications to them and update them about my life. But I fell into a deep, deep depression, and after I placed her, and I didn't understand at the time, and I don't think that my mom even did. We weren't prepared emotionally. I was angry at religion and the church because they didn't treat me kindly when everything happened, and I just felt lost. The only people that were truly 100% supportive all the time were my workmates. Hy-Vee was an amazing source of support for me during that time. Still my favorite grocery store. And I was lucky to have them and to have, so many other people in my life, teachers and mentors that were outside that I think I've taken for granted for a long time, and realize, when you think back to those times, the people that were there to support you, and letting go of that anger towards institution that doesn't really make a lot of sense because it wasn't their fault. But at the time, you're just so angry at everyone, and I didn't understand that it was grief for a very long time. So I kind of went on a path of self-destruction for a couple of years. I drank too much. I was in a group of people that were not good for me. I got in some trouble. And I'm actually lucky to be alive today. And I was about 19 that same year that I was looking for, I'd had my job at Outback, and I finally started going to college. I didn't live at home. I had left home. We didn't get along very well. So I lived with a good friend of mine until I graduated high school, and then went out on my own. And so I bounced around a lot, and I was just lost. I mean, I was hurt. I don't like to use the word damaged. I wasn't damaged. I was lost. I was in grief. And so when I finally met a guy who was like the most normal, kindest human being, his name is Dustin, and we ended up dating, and we ended up actually living together while I was in school for the first couple years. And we ended up breaking up, but we're still very good friends today. And I kind of give him credit that he kind of saved me, kind of woke me up out of my depression and stupor, and was like, what are you going to do with your life? Mm-hmm. So that's why I started going to school. And when I found out about the vet tech program, I immediately started doing prereqs to get into the program, and got my, I had my job at Eagle. And when I found vet med, I think that is really what steered me straight. I found that I really needed to nurture something. I think I didn't realize that, even though I had no intention of keeping this baby, that doesn't mean that the loss wasn't there. And I didn't really understand at that age, and nobody had really, emotional intelligence wasn't as big of a thing then. And it was really confusing. So I eventually started kind of researching and discovering that I needed to heal. I needed time. I needed to accept that it was grief, and that I needed to forgive not only myself, but my family, and repair those relationships. And so it was truly other people that inspired me, and helped me, and that were there for me during those really, really dark times where I was not a friend to myself, and people looking out for me. So I kind of, Dustin was the first one that came in and he was just a source of stability for me, where, he was kind and accepted that I wasn't perfect and that I needed help and I needed an ear to listen to me. And so after that, after I started going to vet tech school and started getting my life together and started kind of exploring my, emotional problems and what the hurdles I needed to get over, I did another curveball in 2011 when I graduated. At the end of that year, I actually moved to Arizona for love, for a guy that I was my high school sweetheart. So I broke up with Dustin, and I was 26 at the time. So no, it was after that. So I was 26 when I moved to Arizona. So I worked at the ER. I was working in ophthalmology, and decided I was going to move to Arizona, move there. Or maybe I was 25 at the time. That makes more sense. 25, because I had finished my degree and all that, and decided that I was going to work for eye care for animals to keep up my skills and to be an RVT. But then I came into possession of a doggy daycare and boarding facility. It was a small facility in Tempe, Arizona. So the owner had placed this ad on Craigslist. She was the wife of an attorney for Obama, and she was trying to get back to DC. And she's trying to find somebody to take this doggy daycare because she couldn't shut it down. Too many people relied on the service, and it was like a cage-free place. We'd have like 30 to 60 dogs a day. It wasn't like a huge facility, but a big enough business to where it was worth something. And so we sat down and had lots of conversations, and I ended up purchasing the small business from her, and not knowing anything about business. I had no idea what I was doing. I remember the day that I turned in my business plan that I had worked in sweat and tears on, to the bank, and thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I shouldn't do this. What am I doing? But I did it. And I did it for almost 4 years. And I learned more, I think, during that time than I ever have in my entire life. Running a business is no small feat. And that's where I got my start in operations, and learned how to, lead people and manage, and how to make a balance sheet, and how to use QuickBooks, and what a P&L is, and started networking. But I learned so much. I learned that I never want to own a doggy daycare and boarding facility again. But I think that my story is not, I'm not alone in, having to overcome grief. But I think what never changed in me was my optimism. I think I was born that way. I actually one year won like Optimist of the Year through Optimist International, before I had Regan. But that's just, it's who I am. But also not forgetting that we're never alone, and there's always a way to overcome. It's all about perspective, and knowing that it's okay to accept that you're hurting and that you need help. Because when I came back, so I had my second daughter in Arizona, and was flying home all the time. And that's why I decided, I can't run a business. I'm like working too much. I'm barely seeing my daughter. And I want my family to be like, she was the first grandchild out of my 4 siblings, that like we could have and hold. And when I had her, something inside of me was like, oh, okay, now I understand why I did all the things I did, why I was in so much grief, why I felt so much loss. And I need to know where she is. I need to know where Regan is. I need to connect with her. Her family had continued sending letters and pictures to me through the adoption agency. I finally reached out and wrote a letter. I had not talked to them in probably 8 years. She was 14 at this time. And I wrote a letter when I moved back to Kansas City, and said, I'm sorry that I've been gone, and I wasn't ready. It wouldn't have been good. It would not have been good if I would have been in her life at that point. I wasn't stable enough, but I was ready. I was ready. I had been through enough that I needed this for myself. And they wrote back and surprised the hell out of me and said, oh my gosh, yes, she needs you, please, let's meet. And I was ready to get on a plane and go wherever she was going to be. I was like preparing for travel. They were like, well, how about the Olive Garden in Liberty?
She was down the road.
I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, of course.
Oh
And
man.
she was 20 minutes down the road. And so from that moment, her family is so amazing. Her parents are just the most phenomenal people. They just from day one, they were just like open arms, come on in, like she needs you just as much as you need her. And the rest is history. She and I got the chance to be together every Monday. We agreed. So a couple months went by where we were building our relationship. She was angry with me.
I was going to say, what was that first meeting like? I mean, she
It
was
was
14, and 14 is not a
uh
bad age for girls anyway.
yeah, it was like magical meeting her, but before that she wrote me a very strongly worded letter about how she was mad and she was angry that I hadn't stayed in touch. And so we immediately connected. I mean, like it was I wrote, so I have a blog that I wrote about this story, and I can share that with you. Before I met her and before I had sent this letter, I had started writing as part of my healing journey. Writing it on paper is for anybody listening, I mean, so cathartic for myself. So if you've never tried it, I know you have, Debbie.
Right,
But
all the time, yeah.
yeah, just get it out on paper. But I had written this story about how I would dream of holding her and just smelling her hair, just like taking it in and just like being close to her. And we actually met in the parking lot. We showed up at the same time, and immediately I she looks on it just like exactly like me. And I remember just like embracing her and just smelling her hair, and it was everything that I had dreamed about. I mean, it was almost, I had to pinch myself. We immediately connected. I mean, it was like we needed each other. And so they agreed after a couple months of making sure that I was stable enough, to be a part of her life. After a couple months, they agreed to let me see her every Monday afternoon after she got out of school. And we got to spend every Monday afternoon for over a year together, learning everything about each other, just talking with her. And I think she needs me as much as I need her. But I will tell you, it took me a long time to regulate my feelings, so many years of therapy. I protected that relationship, but behind the scenes, and she knows this now, but behind the scenes, it was so hard to drop her off at home and drive away. It was so weird, and it felt so wrong, like you should be coming home with me. And that's our nature. That's like, this is my baby. This is my child. But this is her family. And it took me a long time because I hadn't really worked through any of that when I was younger to come to that place. But it's so beautiful. She's going to Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. She's in the musical theater program there. And so her birth dad recently came back into her life a couple of years ago, and his family is phenomenal. And his mom didn't know about her until she was 18. So just learned about her. Only grandchild, and she is a wonderful person. But so it was so that's her biological dad, myself, his mom, her husband, and then all of Regan's adoptive family. So she has two brothers now, older brother, little brother, and her parents. We all went down together as like one big family to celebrate her first show in college. And
That's so cool.
yeah, it was really
Yeah,
cool.
it
It
is
was
really
really,
cool.
yeah, it was very
Yeah.
special. So,
So that's a great story that loops back around to everybody. It all worked out.
yeah.
And that's really a lot of what I've discovered in doing these podcasts, that whatever these hurdles are seems so insurmountable in the moment. I mean, like you were hiding in the bathroom on death's door, basically. But looking back on it, it all works out, and then it all works out for a lot of other things too, because it's such a life lesson, and it's such a learning experience for whatever it is. I mean, my father committed suicide when I was 16, and I think back on that and how my life changed as a 16-year-old girl. And I actually wrote about it. You're talking about writing out things. I wrote about a little blog one day called Don't Leave. And it was about being the child left behind of the dad who left, and dreaming at night that it was a mistake, like that he just gone somewhere and he would come back. But the things that you miss, like seeing the first prom dress and the walk down the aisle and the wedding dance, and all the accomplishments that you make in your life, and you look back and you go, gosh, my dad never knew about any of this stuff. And then I posted it on LinkedIn, and somebody said, I really needed to read this today. And I think, oh man, was this man thinking of ending his life? And maybe this pulled him back. And if so, then it was definitely worth writing it, definitely worth the
Absolutely.
effort. So you just never know how something that you've gone through, not hiding it. That's the other thing, sharing it out there and being really authentic and open about that can be the lifeline for somebody else. One thing that you said that really connected with me, and I've talked about this a lot over the years, is that your work family was your rock. And when we build great cultures, and in so much of the survey you saw, that people were leaving because the work culture was bad and in the veterinary practices, but coming from a practice that had a great culture, I know that I had staff members that were going through terrible things in their homes. They had unsupportive parents or abusive spouses, and we were the rock for those people. And I think that we don't appreciate that enough, and we don't talk about it enough, because we talk about all the bad things, but we don't talk about the good things that are out there in this profession, because we are a profession of extremely empathetic and kind people.
Yeah.
And we throw ourselves on the fire for strangers. So think about what we do for people that we care about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. A lot of hospitals talk about, I've seen people like talk about like, well, the family thing is so cringy, and talking about a clinic culture that we all treat each other like family. I'm like, I think we need to dive deeper into that, because it's not even so much family. It's literally supporting each
Yeah.
other.
Sometimes family sucks, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
think about it,
yes,
maybe you
yes.
don't
And
want to
so
be like family.
And yeah,
Yeah.
like, so, I mean, we need to be supportive of each other, and realize that we're human. And I think that that is coming back, and I've seen a shift. I don't know if you feel it too, Debbie, but
Mhm.
I feel a shift, and we're getting back to that, like, being really intentional and more strategic and thoughtful about the decisions that we make in business, and on the clinic level, because people make up this industry. This industry is literally like, without the people, we would not exist. I mean, this is not a product that we have. This is a
Mhm.
service-based industry.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes take that for granted, even though it's a technical skill,
Mhm.
it is a service that we
Yeah.
provide. This is a
Yeah.
private industry.
Yeah.
So yeah,
A new
absolutely.
graduating veterinarian asked on LinkedIn the other day, what is something that I should know, as I start practice? And I said, you should know that you are in a people business and medicine is the product that you sell. And that always keep that in mind, that this is about people. Our running joke is that I got into vet med because I didn't like humans. Guess what? It is a people business.
And here you are. Yeah.
And the people who are good at people are not the ones who are getting abused by their clients. They're building relationships with those clients. I know of practices all through COVID who really never had to deal with client meltdowns and stuff, because they built this long relationship with people, and people trusted them. And when they said, hey, this is the way we've got to work, then they went, okay. It wasn't a battle. A lot of the times, I think the people that we ended up fighting with more were people that we didn't know, that had come from other places. But there are practices. In fact, the last one that I managed, I was there for like 5 days, and there was a disgruntled client. Of course, as the manager, you always get to talk to those folks. And I was talking to this man, and and he was talking about the terrible service that was there. And I said, why do you come here? And he said, because this is really the best medicine in this area and I want my pets well taken care of, but I honestly feel like I am coming to battle to come into this building. And I went, well, I'm going to change that. And that was why I was hired. I was hired to change the customer service of that practice and and then make it a much more embracing experience to come in the door rather than war. So yeah.
It's not worth it. Well, yeah, it's not good for the staff to do that either. That cannot be a healthy environment to work in,
No,
to,
no. It's
feel that
very, it's a very negative thing to think that, and you're always, I study brain science a lot as my geek out topic. But one of the things I've learned is when people are constantly berated, even if it's nothing but just like constant smart ass remarks or snark, then their brain gets into the pattern of exhaustion. And so we're always anticipating and a fear response, the adrenaline response is the same as if you're getting hit over and over and over again. And you become what's called learned helplessness. And so I know you've probably seen this, and I have too. You have these people who work in these practices, and people are horrible to them. And they're constantly being verbally abused, and, people ostracize them and, whatever. And you're like, why aren't you leaving? There's so many jobs out there. You could just leave. But this learned helplessness, their brain is so fatigued from this that they're like, I can't see how to get out of it. I can't learn. I can't think. And then people wonder why they can't learn. Well, they can't learn because their brain is in fear lockdown, and people don't learn when they're afraid. So if we think that we are going to encourage people to get better by shouting at them, we are actually discouraging any learning on their part, because they hunker down like a hermit crab going into a shell and they can't learn a thing. So this is something I just really feel we need to teach managers, owners, leaders.
it was truly the compassion of other people.
Yeah.
When I know that we're out of time, but the last thing I'll tell you is I was working at Outback, and I had late greets to every table. Okay, I had been there for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I was terrible at my job. I was like the worst waitress on the floor. It was going horribly. And that's back when you could smoke in restaurants. And so my manager, restaurant managers were smokers back in that time. And he pulled me back into this bathroom in the back of the kitchen. He sat down, started smoking a cigarette. And I remember he was a really tall man. And he looks up at me and he goes, Meagan, I really like you as a person. You are so kind. You're so nice. You're so full of positive energy. But if you don't get this right, I'm going to have to fire you. Like, you have to get this right. You have to grate your tables. And, like we went into the stuff that I needed to work on. I remember crying, but he talked to me like a human being and told me, hey, I'm going to have to do this. I like you as a person, but he was compassionate towards me. Mm-hmm. I think in that moment, I'm like, this guy really cares and he wants to help me and he's warning me. Mm-hmm. And so I think that moment, that learned helplessness that you were talking about, I think I was kind of in that mode when I started there, because I was desperate because I had left my job at Hy-Vee and I had been unemployed for several months, and because I was just being an idiot. And so this was like my chance. I'm like, I need this job. I've got to have this job. I can't lose this job. And I remember going home every night crying. But I kept going back and I did not give up. And I worked there for 5 years and ended up becoming a bartender, a key employee, a head wait. I mean, I kept going, and never in a million years, I don't think, had that guy treated me horribly and been mean to me, I probably wouldn't have gone back. But they showed me compassion, and it's really, really important. And look at what I've done, and look at the career, because I didn't give up, but also because those people didn't give up on me.
Right, exactly. Well, the idea of a good manager is to be a coach. And when we think about coaching, the coaches are teaching you how to play the game well. And it's not necessarily that they're the best players, but they know how to teach the game. And I feel like that should be our mentality, rather than, kind of verbally beating up people because they can't do something, is to say, okay, let me figure out how to teach you, because people learn in different ways, and you are a highly empathetic person. So obviously saying get your ass in gear is not going to work for you. But there are other personality types that are so bullheaded. They're like,
That's
I know how to
true.
do this, right? And you're going to have to like, dude, you suck at this. Like, you're going to have to be really, strict about like, hey, so I'm going to give you a reality check here. These are the things that you need to work on. But you don't have to be mean in any of it, right? So you just have to tailor the, communication to the person that's sitting in front of you, and observe them enough to know what that is. That's the other part about hospitality. I shared with you the book that I've written about hospitality and healthcare, but hospitality teaches us to observe people and to make a personal experience for them and to anticipate what they are going to need. So you're sitting there, you're a bartender, and you look down and this guy's got like this much left in his drink. You're anticipating that he's going to be ready for another one. And so you go, you hit the wave and he goes, yeah, another one. And you're right there on it. And what aggravates a customer is to have to flag you down because you're not paying attention to them. So it's the same thing in veterinary medicine. We need to anticipate how to serve people and use those hospitality skills, because when we understand that we collaborate with people, that we are not the authority that dictates down to people, that we're just there to teach and coach and collaborate with people on how to be a great pet owner because it's what they want, then the perspective changes and you're not like the hero of the story. The client's the hero of the story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you've gone through a lot of life here, and tell me a little bit about like the value of networking. Obviously, I mean, you went from, like bartending up to speaking in front of a group of all the top consultants and advisors in in the country. Yeah, how did you feel like you managed that?
Um, well, that is all network. Yeah. So, I was in ER specialty and had the opportunity to apply for a job that I believed I was qualified for, and it was the veterinary relations representative for Blue Pearl Veterinary Partners in Kansas City, and they took a chance on me. And I learned from an amazing man who is no longer with us, how to network. And he actually taught me, I don't think I ever realized or knew that I don't think I ever respected networking. I had built a network of people that organically, because that's who I am, because I just can't stop, talking to people. But I have this personality where I want to learn everything about everyone, right? Like I'm so interested about other people. And your story is fascinating about I don't think I knew that about your father. And I think it's so cool to learn about other people, and that's what's driven me is I ask so many questions about other people, and I just am constantly asking questions all the time. I don't buy into, there's that negative way of thinking of like you hear something about someone that, oh, like don't talk to that person, they're not like they're terrible or whatever, don't go to this doctor because they're mean or whatever. Like I worked with a really difficult doctor. I've worked with tons of difficult doctors and I've never had any issues because my background, and now I'm like starting to connect dots. I'm like, it's probably because I learned that hospitality mindset early on in my life, where there is always an opportunity for a connection regardless of the person. And I think that's why I love the really hard behavior cases with dogs too, because underneath their true nature is not to be aggressive.
Mhm.
Every single living creature on earth is here for a reason, and I guarantee you it's not to rip your face off.
Mm.
And so I think it's about perspective of there is an opportunity with every connection with every person, no matter who they are, and there's never something that you can't learn from another person. My husband's he has his master's in adaptive physical education, so he works with special education children, and that's something that we connect with over because there's so much to learn from those kids.
Mhm.
There's so much to learn from every single person that you come in contact with, and I think Jeff Dennis taught me that. He was the most humble leader I've ever had the pleasure of working for, and seeing him interact with people changed people's lives. He always came from a place of, how can I help you? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who's right or who's wrong. It's that cliche saying of,
Yeah.
how did they make you feel? And
Right.
so when I walk into a practice and I meet with doctors and then they discover I'm a technician and I have all these technical skills too, they're like, wow, like, that's so amazing that you're so good with people. So I work part-time at the ER sometimes here in Kansas City. And I showed a technician, she was training, she got to come with me for like a simple discharge. It was like I think it was like a laceration repair or something. Or no, I think the dog had come in just for a suture removal. Like it was something super simple. And I sat down with the owner side by side and we went over the discharge instructions, and I asked, about their personal life and about their schedule and, how they thought that they were going to, do when they got home. And we walked away and the girl pulled me aside and she said, and I didn't think it was anything special,
Mhm.
Debbie. I was like, I've
Just
done
like
this
your
in my
normal
life.
stuff,
I'm
right?
like,
Yeah.
and she pulls me aside and she goes, wow, you are so good with people. How did you learn to do that? And I'm thinking to myself, like,
Yeah, I know.
maybe
Yeah.
we need to think about that more, Debbie, though.
Yeah.
How did I learn to do that? And
Yeah.
how do you teach people to think about others and to get into that mindset? Because I think that there's some magic there. I think,
Mhm.
but that right there, that's the magic sauce. I didn't know about networking until I got older, and then Jeff taught me, and I connected with Heather Kavitko White.
Uh-huh.
She is something else, and I have loved getting to know her. And she's just like she's different, and she has so much to teach me. And I think I just was a sponge when I worked with her at Blue Pearl. That's how I met her. She was an internist, and we sat and we would have long conversations about service, and she's changed, and we together have grown as professionals, and we've stayed in touch. And she was the reason. I mean, she was my advocate when she learned about the survey. She saw, I didn't ask anybody, I just like launched that thing, and
Mhm.
she's like, Megan, this is awesome. And we got together and we literally just talked about it for days and hours, and we came up with a plan, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And it just goes to show that never discount someone that introduces themselves to you, that you may not think that they're important or that they could be an asset or an advocate for you, but they could one
Mhm.
day.
Oh,
So
yeah.
never burn a bridge.
No. Oh,
Always
big
be
time.
open. Yeah, like open to opportunities. and
Yeah.
and I know we're way over time, and I actually have to go. I have another meeting.
Okay.
But I really appreciate you having me on the show. This has been
Well,
phenomenal.
I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a great story, and I appreciate you being so open and telling it. So, just final words of wisdom, any fun fact about you, and if you want to put a little line in about pet folk and what you guys are doing,
Yeah,
I'm
of
willing to have
course.
do that. Yeah.
Of course, Debbie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do have a few more minutes. I'm so discombobulated because of Fetch. Like my brain is still like on conference time.
Like,
We talked about
yes.
this. Okay, so fun fact. I I said it in my bio, but I am an artist and I love gardening. But I am actually a huge DIY fix-it person. So I love carpentry. I love making things. I'm a tinkerer. Like my husband and I are actually opposite. I fix everything in our house. I have built like literally like wooden structures. I built a gate for our deck. I can install, my dad's an electrician, and I get it from him. He's like very much high energy like me, loves, to figure things out. He's a tinkerer. He's also a carpenter. And I just love making things. He has inspired me. When I was little, we had, a full shop in the garage, and I would always be out there, not doing girly things, but like tinkering around and probably playing with things I should.
Yeah.
But I love power tools. I love, I redid the floors in my basement all by myself, without, my husband. Like, I mean, I love taking on big projects. It makes me feel like I've accomplished something. It's simple, and that's how I truly kind of disengage from life, is I kind of get into something that
I
I'm
love
making.
that. I gotta tell you, my favorite place on earth is a hardware store.
No way.
I love hardware stores. My husband and I remodeled this entire house, floor to ceiling. I can cut a mitered corner for crown molding.
I'm so
Weren't you impressed with that's impressive right there, right? Yeah.
I see,
Yeah.
like, that's amazing. I mean, I think
But my
it's so
husband,
cool.
yeah, my husband was in the flooring business for 50 years. And, everybody has a side gig in vet med because, otherwise we starve. So we used to go out and lay floors at night after work and and I would be his helper to install. I never could spread glue because the one time I tried, I just got it all over myself. I couldn't get the trial going right, but he spread it. I'd hand him stuff. I could cut in a little bit.
There you go, though.
Yeah.
Get your hands
See, I
dirty.
think that's like the artsy part of us that we like to do stuff like that. And it's the way your brain works too. Like you can figure stuff out, like how to put things together and how to make things is always
We
fun.
are, I think we are kindred souls, Debbie. It
I
sounds
think
like
we
we
could
have a lot of
probably,
parallels.
yeah, we could dig in some dirt and build some stuff.
Yeah, we definitely could. So how I've come to Pet Folk. So speaking of networks, right? They actually came to me. I didn't know who Pet Folk was, and I am who I am, and I love people. I love networking. And they said, "Hey, we're building this cool stuff over here. We were wondering if you wanted to talk about opportunities." And I had been in recruiting, and I fell into recruiting because, and every job. So, and for all of you out there wondering about my career path, I have not applied to a job that I've got in the last 5 years. I've just been kind of jumping from, if somebody asked me to come and do something, I'm like, all right, let's do it. I became a director of operations and business development, which was the biggest job I've ever had for a year, at the Humane Society of Greater Kansas City. And we're doing a feral fix on April 22nd for any of you in Kansas City that need a TNR. So I'm helping them with a feral fix clinic on April 22nd. But they called on me. I had a friend call me up and say, "Hey, I'm leaving, but I think you need to come and do some stuff over here. I think you're going to do some great stuff." So went on there, turned that operations around. That's where, like, I knew, I think I had doubted myself because, when I owned a business, it's still in business today, still talk to the owners. I sold it to my managers, like Francis did for me. And, it's still going. They're doing great. They might open a second location. But I think I learned a lot of lessons there, and I had a lot of failures, Debbie. Like, running that business, as you are probably well aware, you learn best when you make mistakes. And I kind of doubted my leadership skills because I was a new leader and I wasn't sure if I could do it. And so that's how I ended up in ER and at Blue Pearl. And then I led this organization. They just celebrated, for the first time in the history of the organization, $1 million in their bank account.
Wow.
And I did a lot of great things for that organization, and that really kind of, I think, lit a fire under me. And I'm like, I think I found my passion. I love leading people. I love growing people, because the people that I put in positions of leadership there and grew them and mentored them, they are now, two of them are with best friends, and they are growing. They're just taking off, and we're still very close. And then another one is now the director, the shelter director there. I mean, it was like, oh, these people are amazing, and they just needed somebody to come in and show them how, and to be there, like you said, their coach. So anyways, that's, irrelevant to pet folk, but I ended up at Pet Folk because that these people are those people. They are trying to do something completely different in vet med. We are being so intentional with every move that we make. This is a different team than I have ever worked with on a corporate level, ever. I mean, I've worked in a couple. I'm not as much as you, Debbie. But when I came on, they are so focused on their people, and the model that they have created is all about hospitality.
Yeah.
And they are driving it, and we have had a 90 NPS score for the last 12 months.
That's
Last
awesome.
month we had a 98 for an
All
entire
right.
day.
That's
So I mean,
fantastic.
so telehealth, mobile, we don't have any live phone lines in the hospitals. All of our staff is 100% fear-free. Phenomenal benefits, leading pay across the board for every position, and every single individual within Pet Folk gets equity in the company.
Love it.
And the clients they love it. I mean,
Yeah.
they love that personalized attention. They get that full, we sit down with them, we go over every single little thing, and we're building relationships because, and going back to your original question, the power of the network.
That's it.
And I think pet folks figured that out. And I'm excited because I think there's a couple of other groups that are they're following in our footsteps, and they're, they're de novos, and they're creating some really phenomenal stuff. And I think clinics, now we're raising the bar, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
and so your book could not have come at, it's like, did you plan this or something, Debbie? Like, what? I mean,
This book has been in my head for more than 10 years because it's all I've ever taught. And I've taught it to all the Patterson PVUs for 11 years. I taught communication and client service classes for them.
I think I've taken I've taken some
I
of
think
your
you might have.
classes. I know
Yeah.
I know, I've seen
Yeah.
you speak. I've seen recordings of you. I've done classes with you. Like, I've been in your lectures. So
Yeah.
I know that you've done so much. So could not have come at a more appropriate.
I'm excited that it's out of my head and onto paper, and thankful for Care Credit for sponsoring it and helping me get it, actually commit the time to it, because I wrote it. It's like 3 months. Yeah, I mean, it had to be in the publisher last Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow,
in
Debbie.
order to launch
Wow.
it at AVMA. So,
Very
yeah,
exciting.
I'm excited, and I really do hope that you guys are already drinking the Kool-Aid. But for those people who can't really afford to send their entire teams to a conference, or to send them to Patterson U or whatever, they can buy this book and learn those lessons, and just and take it from there. Because I wrote it broadly enough for human health too, because I am also a cancer survivor, and dealing with the experience of going through those kind of treatments, and all the other things. I mean, I fell on my feet, broke my arm. I mean, it's still, there's a lot of stuff.
Oh my
Um,
God. Debbie.
yeah, I know, it's crazy. I mean, this is funny. I always pick on Marty Becker about this, because I'm on the Fear Free Advisory Board. So we all were supposed to wear these tennis shoes, because it was going to brand us through this conference at VMX. Well, I brought the shoes home, and they were too big. They were men's shoes, they're really skinny feet. And I thought, oh, I'll just take these things and I'll use them in the garden. And I was digging around, and I was doing mulch, and I stepped on the toe of these two big shoes and tripped and tried to catch myself, and I broke my arm. And so I'm laying there on the ground going, oh, my husband thought I had a heart attack. I went, no, I think I broke my arm. And sure enough, that's what happened. It just cracked it right there.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that
But
would have hurt so bad.
it was, I have a high tolerance for pain, so it's all good. But still, it's just stuff like that. But then you get these experiences where, some of the care providers are fantastic, good hospitality, understand, empathetic, and other ones are just running you through. And as an operations person too, I'm looking at it going, God, do they even know what they're doing? Because it doesn't feel like that, because they're so scattered. So yeah, I wrote a little bit about human health in there too.
Well, my sister is an RN, and there's a reason, I think it's the two of us decided to go into, a field where we nurture, other living things. And she was, one of her first jobs was being a hospice nurse. And she, a lot like me, we're very, driven by people, and we love people. We love being around it. It's what feeds our souls. Which is why I also struggle from working from home, because I need to talk. And so, I have my lifelines that, I call, when I'm like, I feel like I need to get some stuff off my chest. I need to talk to somebody. Making sure that you're calling your friends and you're talking, and, not shutting yourself off is really important too. But, she's just the same. I mean, every clinic that she's worked at, she brings that hospitality, that, that genuine care. And I don't know if you can teach that to people, Debbie. I think that it's like innately inside of you, or you just have to be willing to be open enough to open yourself and be vulnerable enough to care.
Yeah.
And I think that's the scary part sometimes too.
I think it is too. People think they'll get too close to, somebody who's maybe not going to make it. But the truth of the matter is, those are the things that make the difference in whether you enjoy your job or not. Because if you don't want to burn out and have compassion fatigue in your work, connecting with other people is the way to do it, because we're humans. We're built to be collaborative and tribal. And when we cut ourselves off and we don't allow for that, and I find that in a lot of young people who don't understand how to make connections with strangers, even, it does cause a lot of mental health problems, because we really are not built that way. We're built to be connected
together. Yes, together. I mean, that's why I love conferences. It is exhausting. It's hard work. It is a lot, but man, it feeds my soul to be around other like-minded individuals, and the diversity in our field is beautiful. And just coming, and there's so many people that come from all different, walks of life. I mean, you and I sitting here together, it's so interesting that I just actually interviewed this man, and I can't say who it was, but this like phenomenal human who wants to be a part of Pet Folk. And just I think that's actually why I love recruitment, and I don't like calling it that. I want to rename our department the Talent Resource Team. So hopefully anybody that's over here, because that's really what we are. I'm really just talking to people about what they, what's their experience. And that's why I love doing this, Debbie. It's like I get to see inside of people's careers and what drives them, and it's so exciting. And I'm just overall, above all else, I have so much gratitude for all of the chances I've been given, and all of the people that have been willing to let me into their lives and to listen to my story, and to also let me listen to theirs. Because at the end of the day, like you said, we weren't built to be alone. We were built to have a tribe and to have people that support us. And, I think another thing is forgiveness. I think vet med professionals, it's easy for us to shut ourselves off and say, I'm never gonna, let that person, do anything again, or I'm never gonna work there again, or I'm never gonna talk to them again, or, they've burned my bridge or whatever. Because we're all human and we all make mistakes. Sometimes they're bigger than others, and sometimes they're not as forgivable, but forgiveness is a powerful drug. And once you open your heart up and you decide that you're gonna let that anger go, and that you're gonna say, okay, it's gonna be okay. I feel like that also it's a really powerful lesson that I've learned.
That revenge is like drinking poison and hoping it kills it, but it kills you and not the other person.
Perspective of gratitude, and just being accepting that,
well, just give a little grace. That's all we can do. We've been given grace, we might as well give some grace.
Oh man, I've been given so much grace. I've got buckets of it to give. So.
Oh man, well, Megan, this has been great, and I thank you for the extra time, and we'll make sure that people know that we ran a little bit long, but I think it's interesting enough, hopefully, that keeps them on there. And I appreciate you, and I'm sure I will see you out there in the world.
I will. Hopefully I get to go to AVMA, and I'm definitely buying your book, so I'm very, very excited for you.
Your credit's going to give away a bunch, so get in, I'll tuck one back.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks so much,
Debbie. Thank you so much. All right.
Have a great week.
Bye. You too. Bye-bye.